G'day guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Wildkard. Thank you for being here and watching my content. I really do appreciate it. You are here today because it's Wednesday and it's time to read some rugby news. First up, the biggest news of the week. Sir Eddie and my dad has announced the first Wallaby squad for his first Wallaby squad this year. This is actually the second Wallaby squad because Dave already did have a training camp in January, I believe. But yeah, this is quite a different squad from what was announced in January. A lot of names has been left out. And Eddie Jones basically said, hey, there's all the positions are still up for grabs. This is, this is like a preliminary squad. If you work hard, you can still make yourself in a team. This is no way the determinant factor of how this is what's going to be going into the Rugby World Cup. So yeah, with that being said, there was also obviously a bunch of players overseas. Eddie Jones is allowed to select 3 players overseas who are not included in the selections. And Eddie Jones has made it very clear that he's looking at about 5 or 6 players overseas that he will be going to talk to them personally about their commitments to the Wallabies before selecting them. So yeah, he's going to narrow that down to 3 players, but the main thing Eddie Jones is looking for is loyalty, this commitment to rugby in Australia, and obviously the talent, and also one very important thing that Eddie Jones is looking for is that championship quality that we talked about that he looks for a lot. The qualities of a player that is never down and out, who just keeps swinging for the fences, who, have that mental toughness to keep pushing forward. It's not about how hard you hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and you keep moving forward. That is how winning is done, right? According to Rocky, but Eddie Jones has that same mentality when it comes to selecting players. So yeah, let's have a look at the squad that Eddie Jones has selected. So first up, this is the preliminary squad. So Alan Alatoa, Lucy Prop, Ben Donaldson, someone that people were, he was challenged in this interview saying that Donaldson wasn't really that good at the moment, but Eddie Jones was adamant that Donaldson's performance in November for the Wallabies was good enough to warrant a selection, to warrant a look at for this training camp. Paul Mausili, he is just a huge prop. I do think that he's got a lot better since last year. A lot of the Rebels players really deservingly to be selected here. I got a lot better. The Rebels players, the Rebels team has been a lot better this year than last year. And as a result, I think a lot of these players really deserve the spot. Unlike previous years, the Rebels players really deserve the spot for this training camp at least. Josh Fluke gets a call into the camp. He has been really good for the Reds, especially this year. The Reds hasn't been performing that well this year, but Josh Fluke is definitely an outstanding player, despite his teammates not quite doing as good as he has been. Lalakai Foketi gets called in for Eddie. Nick Frost, Langi Gleeson, the other guy for the Waratahs, has been tremendously good for the Waratahs. I'm really happy to see him to get a nod. Here's a big one. Carter Gordon. Long gone the days, Carter Gordon having a cry, a literal cry after losing again, after getting flogged on the field for playing like garbage, right? Long gone those days. He's really got himself together now, really grown and developed to be a man. And Eddie Jones specifically said that he saw that mental toughness out of Carter Gordon that he's looking for. In the weekend, the Rebels played Fijian and Jura, and the Juras basically flogged the Rebels in the first half, absolute, flogging over the Rebels, and Carter Gordon just stayed in the game, kept on pushing and tried, and Rebels got really close to catch up with the deficit. But yeah, that's the quality that Eddie Jones is kind of looking for. Someone never gives up and keeps trying. So yeah, Carter Gordon definitely gets the nod, and it's been quite good as well for the Rebels so far this season. Ned Halligan next coming up. Reece Hodge, another Rebels player, gets called in. Michael Hooper gets called back in. When it comes to captaincy, Eddie Jones was very adamant that there's going to be more than one captain in the team due to injuries and concussion protocols. So he did not in any shape or form name the captain in this announcement. But Michael Hooper probably will be on the top of the list for consideration for captaincy. Jed Holloway, Len Ikitau has just signed with the Wallabies until 2025, which is really good. I was worried that he might going to leave. Max Jorgensen, the youngest player in the team, he plays for the Waratahs, and a lot of people thought he's too young for the Wallabies. But Eddie Jones basically said, hey, it's not about how old you are. If you're ready, you're going to be ready. So Eddie Jones thinks that Max Jorgensen is ready to, take on the big boys in international test rugby. Andrew Callaway, after returning from injury last week, gets called into the camp. Lachie Lonergan gets another shot. Ryan Lonergan is the one of the two halfbacks being called into the squad. So Ryan Lonergan has really impressed Eddie Jones for the Brumbies. Obviously, this is over Tay McDermott, who didn't get selected at all. Well, what's the guy's name for the Rebels? But yeah, anyway, so Ryan Lonergan is one of the only two number 9s that's been selected. Fraser McRae gets called in for Eddie Jones. Mark Nawangani Tawasi, the winger, has been tremendously well for the Wallabies last year and been tremendously good for the Waratahs as well so far. So definitely looking at the starting jersey for the Wallabies in the Eddie Jones' mind, I hope. Caden Neville gets a shot. Jordy Patea gets called in. David Parecki gets a shot. Tom Robinson is the next up. P. Samuel, despite leaving for overseas, I believe, he's selected here. He's probably the best guy coming off the bench. That impact player, that speed he brings is really impressive. Blake Shroop, I don't know how to say his last name. He's another new addition to the squad. James Slipper, and another guy who could potentially be considered as a captain option other than Michael Hooper. Darcy Swain, gets caught in. The dirtiest player in the world, apparently. Jordan Ulesi, another Rebels player. A hooker. Ulesi has been, Eddie Jones, again, has been really impressed with his physicality. Needs to work on his technique in throwing, but he could definitely be a world-class hooker one day if he continues to improve. Rob Valentini gets caught in. Suliasi Vinivalu gets caught in once again. Again, one of the league converts who hasn't really quite reached the level of the Wallabies, but hopefully Eddie Jones gets to see how he goes. Nick White is the other number 9 that gets caught in. Brad Wilkins, and finally Tom Wright, the best player in the Wallabies last year, gets caught in for Eddie Jones. So obviously there was a few big names that was missing in the squad. Let's have a look at that. Let's have a look at that. So yeah, Rory Arnold is one of the guys that Eddie Jones has opted to not select him at all, because Arnold is in a bit of a funny situation. He played in Japan, but his club was suspended from playing by the Japanese One League due to indiscretions of field. They went to like a club and they just harassed a bunch of waitresses. So the club was suspended. So Rory Arnold is getting paid like what, $4.5 million or something to not play rugby at the moment in Japan. So Eddie Jones basically jokingly said that he's probably working in the factory because he's getting paid so much money. They're going to get him to do something, but he's not playing rugby. So if you don't play rugby, he's not going to be selected. But Eddie Jones did say that he is looking at his brother, who is Richie Arnold, playing in France at the moment. But he is definitely really adamant about not selecting players that are not being played. So yeah, the big names have been left out. Noah Lolosio, the Brumbies number 10, has been quite good for the Brumbies, but I do think that he's been pretty flat for the Wallabies last year. It's almost like he not quite taking that next step up. Like Lolosio has all the talents, but he's just not quite taking the next step up to take the ranks at the Wallabies. So yeah, Noah Lolosio gets missed out from the camp. So obviously the overseas players, Bernard Foley, Quade Cooper, has been talked about linking up with via Zoom meeting. But the other name that was left out, James O'Connor, obviously we talked about Tate McDermott, and it is what it is. James O'Connor falling out of favour as well. He was the guy a couple of years ago for the Wallabies, and his performance of the Red was really good. And due to some injuries, being on the bench for a while, just really hasn't returned to the same form that he was before. Yeah, it is what it is. We'll see how things go. Maybe he'll get a run later on in the camp, but at the moment, he's not quite there yet. Tom Liner, another guy Eddie Jones was asked if Tom Liner was going to be selected if he wasn't injured. Eddie Jones basically said, I'm not going to speculate. He's injured now, so he's out of the question. So I'm not going to say he would have been selected if he was injured, because obviously that's a bit of an awkward answer. So he was really smart to not mention whether or not he was going to be selected or not. So there's some few overseas players he's looking at considering. Eddie Jones, he's going to do his homework. He's going to meet up with each and every one of these players to check their commitments with the Wallabies before selecting them. So Tom Banks, Craig Cooper, Bernard Foley, Marika Korombeti, Samuel Karevi, and Will Skelton, they will all be meeting up with Eddie Jones prior to Eddie Jones selecting only three. Three of them will be selected to be a part of the squad. With that being said, so obviously last week Eddie Jones has come out with a hit list of players that he wants for his team, and no, Joseph Swali'i was not on the list. So Nathan Cleary is one of the players that actually came out last week. I think it might be a week ago now. That kind of like jokingly about that he might switch to Union, and we know Nathan Cleary is the best 5'8" in rugby league. He's won multiple championships, State of Origin, Rugby League World Cup. Yeah, Nathan Cleary is that good. And I was surprised they didn't offer 1.3 million to Cleary. 1.6 million to Cleary, but offer 1.6 to Swali'i. It's so stupid. But anyway, that's a different story. But Nathan Cleary did say that he could potentially convert. But the other one that Eddie Jones really wanted was Cameron Murray and Matt Burton are on his list. But yeah, Nathan Cleary, if he switch codes, man, that'll be so huge. In case you don't know, this is Cleary's dad, and his dad coaches the Panthers. Imagine your dad coach is the coach, and you go in playing under your dad, and you win a championship as father and son. Just like, man, that is a dream. Father and son winning the championship. That's quite a story. But anyway, that's rugby league for you. So next up, we've got, so obviously Eddie Jones operating the Wallabies is going to be a bit different. There has been infamous stories of Eddie Jones calling the 4-pack out of their bed in the middle of the night to do line-out discussion, like to talk about line-outs, right? Like, it was literally infamous stories of Eddie Jones, how he operates just on a instant snap decisions and getting people to be committed to the game. So yeah, Ben Youngs kind of came out last week and talked about some of the main differences between Bothwick and Eddie Jones. And Bothwick, he talked about it's more organized. Everything is done, during training, and when you're away off training, you're basically off work. You don't have there's no rugby to be discussed once you're out of training. But Eddie Jones, just like the stories that we've been hearing about, basically, it was, you're always like, ready to talk about rugby. Eddie Jones will literally like pull you out of the dinner and spend 5 minutes to look at this, take a few minutes to have a look at that. I wanted to talk about something, and it's always on, always working. And Ben Youngs has talked about how that could be just too much for some of the players because you don't really have a downtime. But yeah, it is what it is. You got to work hard. Eddie Jones talked about you got to work hard. If you love the game, it is what it is. You got to get ready to be as passionate about the game as he is. If you're not, then you are going to get dropped, right? But obviously, it is pretty hard line. Everybody's different. Obviously, some people needs to have some time off. Even me, sometimes I get too overwhelmed by rugby, and it's needs to just stay away from it to do something else for a little bit before I can get back onto it. And it's the same thing. I'm sure Eddie Jones, outside of rugby, he has nothing else to do, maybe, but he just thinks about rugby all day, and he expects everybody else to do that also. So Super Rugby on the weekend. Let's quickly go through the results. So first game of the week, Moana Pacifica, 17 points to 45 down to Highlanders. And then later on that night, the Reds hosted the Crusaders in Brisbane. What can I say? I mean, this wasn't like, the Reds wasn't that great, but the Crusaders wasn't that impressive either. 12 points to 25. I did feel like if the Crusaders were more clinical, they could have put the Reds away with more points. But yeah, it was not that great for both teams, to be fair. The Crusaders, if the Crusaders was from last year's Crusaders, played this Reds team, would have absolutely flogged the Reds team, but it was quite a easy win for the Crusaders. And then the big one, Fijian Endura, 38-28 over the Rebels. This was a very intriguing game for me. I did feel like the Rebels should have been beaten the Enduras, considering how good the Rebels has been this season. One of the better teams in the Australian rugby so far this season. But yeah, the Enduras came out first half, 33 points on the board already just before halftime. So the Rebels was getting absolutely flogged. And then, like Eddie Jones was saying, Carter Gordon leading the number 10 spot. Just keep on grinding, got the Rebels back into the game. 28 points to 38 went down. But yeah, the Rebels really, swung for the fences all the way to the last minute. And then Enduras was able to, manage the game and hold on to their win margin, and a well deserved win, 38 points to 28. Next up, the Chiefs versus the Blues. Again, I was excited for this game. I thought this was going to be like, because Chiefs is number one in the team, undefeated. It's David McKenzie versus Beauden Barrett. And it turned out to be really a bit lackluster. 20 points to 13. Both teams were a little bit off. Beauden Barrett was doing an Owen Farrell on the weekend. Missed like so many kicks that just like completely like skewed it. He like dropped the ball at one point. And then like, what else? Oh yeah, what happened to Beauden? Did someone it was not Beauden playing on the weekend, right? There was one point with Beauden, he literally scored. He was in the try zone, and you know how some players were like trying to run the ball closer to the goalpost, and as he was like running, in the end zone, running towards the goalpost, trying to ground the ball a bit closer, and he got ankle tapped, and he slipped onto the try line, their ball line, and he didn't score the try. Like, it was just like unbelievable. I've never seen that before. I've never seen a player run into the try zone and then gets ankle tapped and slips out of the dead ball area. Like, I've never seen that before. Like, he's literally a guaranteed try and he didn't score. Like, I've never seen that before, and this happened to Beauden Barrett. So yeah, I don't know what happened to him. And then he missed a bunch of kicks. So if that try was scored, and if Beauden Barrett had converted 2 of his conversions, the Blues could have probably won that. But yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, Beauden Barrett. What happened to Beauden? And then the next one, the derby, Brumbies versus the Waratahs. This game, I thought the Waratahs looked really, really good straight out of the park. It looked like the Waratahs was gonna, steer home a win over the Brumbies. But yeah, second half, the Brumbies bench came on, just really pummeled the Waratahs and pulled themselves out of trouble. 40 points to 36 for this one. And finally, the final game of the week was the Hurricanes versus the Western Force in a basketball match. I guess the Waratahs one could be a basketball match as well. But yeah, again, the Hurricanes came out just absolutely flying. 3 tries in less than 20 minutes. Western Force hanging there, slowly trying to catch up. But yeah, the Hurricanes was able to just put out too far ahead. In the last 10 minutes or so, the Western Force tried to make a comeback, but it was too little too late, going down 42 points to 45. So yeah, Michael Liner has been signed with the Reds for till 2025, so there will be a time for him to go for the Wallabies. Lake Ikitau signed to 2025, which is really good as well. So yeah, let's go to South Africa. Some big news in South Africa as well. So according to Rassie Erasmus, Nigel Owens is about to sign with the Springboks, which is a quite big signing. So Owens was approached by Rassie Erasmus to become like a referee consultant. So France has Jerome Garcia as the referee consultant. So the Springboks wants to improve their discipline, obviously, and have a professional world-class referee consultant by their side. And they wanted to get Nigel Owens, and it is rumored that Owens was. So Owens initially said he wants to think about it because he's retired, didn't want to get back into it. But yeah, it is rumored that last week that he might be on the verge of signing with the Springboks, which would be really good. Some more news for the Springboks. Peter du Toit had a deal with the French club Toulon, but it was said that this deal had fallen apart due to too high of a price tag for this guy. Toulon was not able to afford. So a couple of injury issues that the Springboks will be sweating a little bit. So Eben Smith is set to have a bit of an injury, and also Jaden Hendricks are also had a bit of an injury to his arm. Both players had arm injuries. So yeah, going into the next rounds, the Sharks in the quarterfinals in Champions Cup, the Sharks might be struggling a little bit, especially Eben Smith if he's not able to perform. But yeah, hopefully they're going to be okay. Hopefully no long-term injuries, especially with the Rugby World Cup so close. So next big thing from the South Africa now. So the Harlequins has been knocked out of the Champions Cup, losing to the Stormers. I thought this was a really good performance. What's his name? Dion Fury scored 2 tries this game. Was running like a fullback. He was fast, man. I mean, he was the fastest. 37 now? 37 forward in the world, man. Like he was scoring tries left and right. It was really good to see. So Harlequins went down to the Stormers. Entertaining game. The Harlequins, as always, was not taking penalties. Just going for the line out, and the Stormers was able to hold. And yeah, it is what it is. Next up, RG Snyman has been getting ready to come back to rugby finally. He's been out for 32 months. He's won the Rugby World Cup and then just been out due to injury. So now he's finally ready to return to play for Munster coming up this weekend, essentially. Next up, so another Blues player. Do these two guys look exactly the same to you? That's the same guy, isn't it? That is literally the same person. That's the same person. Anyway, so Tom Robinson and not RG Snyman has signed to play in Japan for 2024, so next year. Another guy that's leaving New Zealand Rugby, so there was a bit of alarm going off by the CEO, David Monfett, to talk about how, too many players are leaving New Zealand Rugby. You need to look at how they're managing their players. So yeah, RG Snyman is leaving New Zealand Rugby. So Brad Thorne has talked about how he wants to take some time off after being just like working like non-stop for the last 30 years now, essentially. So he's been talking about that, but he also talked about Joseph Suaalii signing, and one of the main things he's talking about is he thinks that the Suaalii signing means that it's becoming more and more difficult to retain players in rugby in their clubs. For New Zealand Rugby, the good news is Ethan de Groot has committed to New Zealand Rugby to 2026, which is really good. And then moving on to England Rugby now. So England Rugby is, collecting all the ex Springboks support staff, I guess, from the Rugby World Cup 2019 to work for them. So Steve Bothwick has added another staff from the Springboks, which is Felix Jones, in addition to Alec Walters, who were both worked for the Springboks in the 2019 Rugby World Cup. So yeah, and then next up, Wales has finally agreed a 6-year deal for their clubs. So there was a strike, there was all that sort of stuff going on in Wales because the union could not agree to a financial plan to fundings to the clubs essentially. But finally, they have come out with a 6-year deal to their clubs. And finally, there was an investigation in England. The Newcastle Falcons was alleged of racism by this guy Luther Burrell. But so after the investigation by the RFU, it is said that these things could probably happen, but there was no way to confirm that the people who actually did it. So then yeah, it was just it's just saying that it's a high chance of probability that this happened. But there's no way. There's not enough evidence to pin down the exact perpetrators of alleged racism against Luther Burrell. So yeah, that is the news for this week, guys. Thanks for watching. I've been sick last week, so I didn't really make much videos. But thanks for sticking around. I really do appreciate it. I'll see you guys this weekend for Super Rugby, and have a good weekend. Cheers.